Alright, Trekkies and Trekkers, it's time to take a look at the final episode of the day, as well as the penultimate episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 4, Body Parts. Dax, Chief O'Brien, and Warfare and Ops discussing the trip that Bashir, Kira, and Keiko are planning. The trip that Bashir, Kira, and Keiko are on to the planet Tarad 5 in the Gamma Quadrant. O'Brien refers to Worf and Dax on how he didn't want Keiko to go to Torad 5 in the first place in her condition. Meanwhile, in his bar, Quark treats Rom to a glass of snail juice uncharacteristically on the house, to celebrate his return from Ferengar and to announce that he is dying to all of his customers. Quark declares he has Dorec syndrome with just 6 days to live, which he learned of after his annual insurance physical from Dr. Orpox. Rom takes some convincing that there's no other recourse, including suggesting talking to Dr. Bashir, but Quark doesn't think that will help. Quark turns to the significant debt he has and funeral arrangements to make. Rom suggests selling his vacuum-desiccated remains on the Ferengi Futures Exchange. Quark doesn't believe that will help. He believes he's not viewed favorably by other Ferengi, Starfleet's favorite bartender, a joke. Rom insists he try, so Quark agrees. Shortly after ops, the USS Volga emerges from the wormhole with severe damage. Worf reports to Captain Sisko that Dr. Bashir has reported 2 injuries, Kira and Keiko. O'Brien rushes to the infirmary and learns from Kira that Keiko is still in surgery. Much to his surprise, he also learns that Kira is now carrying his son. O'Brien is now with Sisko and Bashir, who explain that Keiko was injured in the accident with a collision with an asteroid in the Gamma Quadrant. She was stabilized, but Bashir had to move the baby to Kira to save its life, and interestingly, due to the short gestation period of Bajorans, Kira miscarried the baby to term. O'Brien has to process this. Later, Kira and Keiko soon recover, and Kira goes to visit Keiko in her quarters, loving the way to which transpired, and Keiko expressing her thanks. Rom goes to visit Quark in his quarters to hear about the sale. At first, it seems simple, but Rom wants to buy a piece of Quark, which he of course finds insulting. He starts to dismay about his life choices in opening a bar on Deep Space Nine. However, Quark is overjoyed to find the anonymous bidder wants to buy all 52 discs for 500 bars of latinum. Convincing anonymous bidders and Nagus, and fearful that the bid will eventually be retracted, Quark accepts the bid and sells his remains. Rom congratulates him. Quark begins to arrange paying off his debts and arranging his funeral when Bashir informs him that his doctor on Ferengar, Orpox, had made an error and he's not going to die. Quark is excited about the prospect of suing his doctors for malpractice, but the continuation of his life is just an afterthought. However, later, Brunt of the FC arrives at his quarters and explains he was the anonymous buyer. He condescendingly asks if Quark thought the Nagas placed the bid. The two laugh over that and agree that it would be a ridiculous idea. Quark explains he is surprised that Brunt placed the bid and that he's not going to die. Brunt knows this already and has arrived to ensure that his merchandise, 52 discs of vacuum-desiccated Quark, will be delivered on time in 6 days. Quark makes it clear that he is not dying, to which Brunt replies that he does not care that Quark isn't dying. He wants his merchandise. He intends to devour Quark remains upon receiving them, and not be talked out of the contract. Quark proceeds to offer Brunt a full refund and progressively large amounts of latinum to try to convince Brunt to give up the deal. Brunt refuses all offers and tells Quark he will only accept his remains. Quark asks what Brunt expects him to do. Brunt suggests Quark hires someone to strangle him. That way his body will be unmarked for desiccation. Quark is shocked and says they are not Klingons. Brunt tells Quark that this is personal. Brunt tells Quark that he considers him a menace to Ferengi society, citing the time he protected Quark's mother from an audit and when he secretly settled a strike at his bar. He loves Quark for being a philanthropist. He doesn't gouge his customers as much as some Ferengi should. Selling medicine to Bajoran refugees has made him a generous humanitarian who has gone Starfleet. All this gives other Ferengi a bad name. Quark begs he can reform. They can gouge his customers more and revoke his employees' vacation time. Brunt is discussed by Quark's giving his employees vacation time and proceeds to start to leave the room. Quark cuts him off and tries to make another deal with him. Surely there's another combination that Quark can make besides suicide. Brunt tells him the only way out is to break the contract. He wonders if Quark is frank enough to keep the contract and hopes that he will break it. He wants to see Quark's assets sold to the lowest bidder, his mother begging on the street, and have to cut Quark off a remote contract with his people. Brent says the cork is a disease, and that his job is to cut him off. Miles helps Keiko to a chair in their quarters. Keiko tells Miles that she's invited Kira over for dinner. The two agree that seeing Kira every day will not be enough time for them to spend with their unborn child. She expresses frustration having to make appointments to see her own child. Neither of them knows what to do. Quark visits Garrick's shop. He's busy helping more informs Quark that his pants will not be ready for another week. Quark tells him he is there in order to hire him as an assassin. Garrick feigns ignorance and says that before he was a tailor, he was a gardener. Quark is not so easily dissuaded and tells him he still wants to hire him. Rom initially believes that Quark will have Brunt assassinated, but Quark reveals that he is the one that is to be killed. Rom is upset about Quark's intentions to go through with the contract. Quark explains that he is like no one else in their family. He's a Ferengi businessman. He will go through with the contract. His life is about his business, and that means he follows the Ferengi rules of acquisition, and he will not stop following them if they are inconvenient. He's confident that if he continues to follow the rules, he will find himself in the divine treasure after his death, because he will die the way he lived, as a Ferengi. He and Garrick then leave to discuss the method of his death. Kira visits Keiko and O'Brien to show them how much the baby is kicking. Kira's concerned, but Keiko tells Kira that this is good, and she thought Molly would kick her way out. Keiko thanks Kira for sharing this with them. The two discuss the differences between human and Bajoran pregnancies, and the fact that they do not know what Kira's symptoms will be because the baby is human. Bajorans do not get morning sickness, but they suffer from uncontrollable sneezing. Miles gets Kira a special pillow for her lower back. They invite her to remain for dinner, but initially Kira does not want to impose. But Keiko insists that since Kira is carrying her baby, she is now family, and that besides dinner, the O'Briens also want to make a proposal. Quark is eating dinner at the bar. Garrick sneaks up from behind him and breaks his neck. Quark walks over, and it becomes apparent that the dead Quark is only a hologram. Quark objects to the loud noise his neck makes when it is broken. Garrick objects that it's not that loud. They run out of options because Quark objects to all the methods that Garrick has suggested. He could be disintegrated because he needed his body. The disruptor ruined Quark's clothing. The knife was too savage. The nerve gas smelled bad. Hanging took too long, and Quark would not willingly eat poisoned food. Garrick comments that Quark does not seem to want to die, to which Quark objects that he just doesn't want to see it coming. Garrick promises that Quark will never know what hit him. Jody Quark heads to bed while trying to stave off death by yelling he won't be surprised if he enters his room. He quickly falls asleep and awakens in what looks like the divine treasury. The first Grand Nagus, skinned, looks suspiciously similar to Quark's brother Rom, comes to him and Quark realizes that he is dreaming. The Nagus, or at least Quark's conscious, tells Quark that he must break the contract. Quark asks how he can walk away from the rules. To this, Gent explains that when he authored the rules of acquisition, he called them such as a marketing ploy, and considers them more like suggestions. Gent explains that Quark is having this dream because he is looking for permission to break the contract. Quark explains that the Gent came to him in a dream and told him to break the contract, then it would be acceptable. Brent then appears, and all three of them argue until Brent begins strangling Quark, who wakes up in his sleep with his hands around his own throat. The next day, Quark works at his bar and refuses to honor the contract. Brent, sitting at a table, smiles as Quark has proved himself to be just another failure and long-line weak-lobed Ferengi. However, Quark threatens that if he ever returns to his bar, he will never leave. Brent humiliatingly revokes Quark's business license, slaps legal documents on the walls, preventing any Ferengi business to continue and seizes all of his assets. Quark has left no other choice but to close the bar immediately and indefinitely, and starts to ask his customers to leave. Kira arrives at the O'Brien's quarters, and where she has agreed to live for the duration of the pregnancy. Kira tells Molly that she is her Aunt Kira and that Molly is welcome to play in her room any time. Quark sits in a bare area near the bar where the Dabo table used to be. Having been left with nothing, not even the shirt on his back, which needs to be returned later to Brunt. Ron tries to cheer him up by offering Quark some of his old clothes, but to no avail. However, Bashir enters with the crate of Albanian brandy, claiming that the patient gave them to him as a gift, and as he cannot accept them, he is willing to give them to Quark. The Dax arrives with the dozen glasses she was given as a gift by her sister that she claims are too ugly to keep. Captain Cisco arrives and asks Quark if he can store several sets of tables and chairs from structural repair on level 2 of the habitat ring in the area, since it's currently free. Quark is curious what's happening, as crew residents start bringing in everything he needs to continue running the bar. Ron reminds his brother that Brent didn't take all of his assets away, and Quark has apparently earned the loyalty and respect of many aboard the station. Despite being broke, Quark has to ponder the thought that friends may be the most valuable asset of all. Overwhelmed by his friends showing their support, he attempts to thank them, but is literally speechless. Yeah, that's, I would definitely have the same reaction to something like that happened to me, so yeah. Anyway. So let's take a look at some continuity surrounding this episode. The FCA notice placed on the wall by the liquidator Brendan at the end of this episode remains in place until the 5th season episode Frankie Love Songs, which time Quark has his license restored by Brunt. Brunt's references to Quark's mother and his union troubles refer to the episode's family business and bar association, respectively. Ron recalls to Quark the latter's brief holding of the title of Grand Nagus, a reference to the first season episode The Nagus. Reference Rules Acquisition number 17. A contract is a contract billing between Ferengi and 239. Never be afraid to mislabel a product. This episode also introduces a new runabout, the USS Volga. The episode by Inferno's Light later makes it clear that this is not a replacement for one of the other three runabouts, but a fourth runabout. 3 runabouts are used in the defense of DS9, while another was in the Gamma Quadrant. The others were the Rio Grande, Rubicon, and Yukon. A fourth runabout was also seen in Visionary. From this episode onwards, Andrew Robinson, who plays Garrick, is credited as Andrew J. Robinson. According to Robinson, the J stands for Jord, his grandfather's first name. The on-screen scene of the damaged Volga was later used to depict the damage to the Rio Grande in Apocalypse Rising. Garrick Lofton, who plays Jake Sisko, does not appear in this episode. So overall, I think this is a pretty interesting episode, and yeah, well, it does take a while for Quark to get his business license back. At least he does still have at least he still has the loyalty of all his customers and friends and whatnot. So yeah. So overall, I give Body Parts 3 warp cores out of 5. Anyway, tune in more as we look at the finale of DS9 Season 4, Broken Link. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.